The film begins with two best friends, uptight Katie and promiscuous Sloane, who are excited about their upcoming out-of-town trip. They will be working at Ecofield Organic Farms for a month in order to save money to go shopping in New York City. The next morning, they are picked up by Katie's cop uncle, Jason, and will spend the night at Jason and his girlfriend's house before heading to the farm. Sloane suggests that they make up fictitious names while they are settling into their new surroundings. Sloane suggests the name Heather, while Katie suggests the name Ripley. The next day, Uncle Jason drops the two off at a station from which they will catch a bus to the farm. Jason, being the protective cop uncle that he is, advises them to come up with a safe word in case they get into trouble. The deal is that they must include a code word at the end of each text message. In other words, Jason requests that Katie send him a different code word in alphabetical order each day. Apple is the safe word of the day. After the uncle departs, the two must wait for the bus, which is due to arrive in about an hour, and they decide to wait at the cafe. They quickly pique the interest of two townspeople and end up sharing a table with them. The two women then introduce themselves using the fictitious names they made up the night before, while the two men introduce themselves as brothers named Jed and Lucas. The brothers offer to drive them to their workplace, and while Katie is initially hesitant, she succumbs to Sloane's silent plea. The two eventually climb into the young men's blue truck. Things, however, do not go as planned. Jed purposefully drives by the farm where Katie and Sloane work, confusing the two women. Finally, they arrive. The two women are greeted by Jed and Lucas's suspicious mother, who invites them to tea before heading to the farm. Katie receives a text from her cop uncle once they're inside, and she lets him know she's fine using their agreed-upon safe words. Meanwhile, the two eat pie and drink tea, both of which they probably shouldn't do, but do anyway. As it turns out, there are drugs in their drinks. Their vision becomes blurred. After realizing something is wrong, the two flee for their lives. Unfortunately, Jed and Lucas manage to knock them out and drag them inside. Katie and Sloane are panicked and chained up in the middle of the woods the next day. Jed approaches them and informs them that they will now be living here, and that they will be provided with basic necessities such as clothes, a bed, and a toilet. We proceed to the next scene, where Katie and Sloane have been dressed, and Jed's boss, Boris, arrives and takes Katie's phone to see if anyone knows where they are. He discovers that Katie and Sloane lied about their names, as well as the code word she used in the text message at this point. Katie and Sloane are finally forced to inform him that the word apple is a code word. As soon as everything is back on track, Katie and Sloane are about to take a bath with makeshift showers when the town's sheriff arrives with his gun drawn. The sheriff, it turns out, is a jerk who supports human trafficking and has come to rape one of the women. Sloane visits a shaken-looking Katie to comfort her after the evil sheriff has had his fill. Uncle Jason is concerned on the other side of town because the most recent text he received from Katie contained the same safe word that she used yesterday. Back inside the woods, Jed and Lucas greet another customer, whom we will refer to as Scruffy Guy from now on. He then approaches Sloane and leads her inside the trailer. Unsurprisingly, Scruffy Guy is a psychopath. Back to the cop uncle. He finally calls Sloane and Katie's workplace and discovers that they did not show up for work yesterday. He rushes to look for them, convinced they are in danger. Meanwhile, Sloane and Katie's day is about to get even worse because the next customer arrives is even shadier than the last. As the next customer approaches, Jed and Lucas rush to cover their heads. Sloane is picked up by the pig mask dude and taken inside the trailer. After he departs, it is Katie's turn to comfort a shaken Sloane. We're not sure what the pig mask guy did to her, but she appears even more traumatized than before. In the following scene, Uncle Jason arrives at the sheriff's office and runs into the town's perverted sheriff, whom we previously saw. We learn here that the uncle is not only a cop, but also an FBI agent. He expresses his concerns and believes his niece has been kidnapped. To add to the intrigue, the FBI uncle decides to tell the sheriff about how he knows they're in trouble because Katie didn't use a new code word in her most recent text message. Back in the woods, the sheriff has obviously informed the kidnappers that Katie's uncle is an FBI agent and that Katie lied to them about the safe word. Boris orders Jeff to kill them both and dispose of their bodies because he does not want the FBI to investigate their human trafficking business. Katie, unbeknownst to them, is listening in on their conversation. During this time, the FBI uncle decides to return to the cafe where he last saw Katie and Sloane. He then inquires of the barista. The barista recalls exactly what kind of truck Katie and Sloane left in. The next day, Katie informs Sloane that the kidnappers intend to kill them soon, before the kidnappers and Scruffy Guy arrive. They then leave Scruffy Guy behind to keep an eye on them. Katie takes advantage of the situation to seduce him, and once close enough, she rips his throat with her bare teeth. The two women then proceed to untie themselves from their shackles. Not long after that, the sheriff arrives, presumably to kill them. But just as he gets out of his car, Katie and Sloane steal it. The two women return to town and go to the hardware store to stock up on supplies. Something bad is about to happen. They then inquire about Boris, the man with the blue truck, and the cashier knows where he lives. Uncle Jason, on the other side of town, continues his investigation today by visiting the town's car insurance building. He invents a story about accidentally colliding with a blue truck and inquires as to who owns it. Boris, the boss, has just returned home. Katie and Sloane have sneaked up on him and thrown a bunch of nail-spiked tennis balls at him, severely injuring him. Boris begs for his life now that the tables have been turned, and even offers his money in exchange for his life. Uncle Jason then pulls up in front of Boris' house. Back inside, Katie and Sloane start questioning him about who the man in the pig mask is. When Boris refuses to reveal it, Katie and Sloane take a homemade spear and shove it up his behind, eventually killing him. Uncle Jason finally enters the house, and it appears that Katie and Sloane have left, and he sees a dying Boris. Then Jason hears the roar of car engines and sees storms outside. While Katie and Sloane drive away, Uncle Jason rushes the dying Boris to the hospital. The sheriff then informs Uncle Jason that Boris did not make it. Uncle Jason, becoming increasingly concerned, decides to call Katie's phone, but then the sheriff pulls out his gun, realizing his cover has been blown. Katie and Sloane arrive in front of a church, where we discover that the pig mask dude is actually the town's priest. Sloane walks into the church and comes face to face with her rapist. The two women appear to be doing well. Uncle Jason is now being held captive by the sheriff. Worse, the sheriff appears to have apprehended two new young women. Fortunately, Katie and Sloane have arrived to help. They bind the sheriff and torture him with a game of Russian roulette. We can see now that the two women are slightly insane, but I suppose we can't blame them. When Katie finally finishes him off with a blow to the head, the sheriff begins to apologize. Katie and Sloane then free the women and tell them to free Uncle Jason. Jason tries to question the women who killed the sheriff, but they refuse to answer because Katie and Sloane saved their lives. Next, Katie and Sloane pay a visit to Jed and Lucas's mother's house, where she decides to drug her in the same way she drugged them just a few days ago. They bind her and drag her to the basement, where Jed is bound and gagged. While his mother is forced to watch, they proceed to bash his head in with baseball bats. They then take her to Lucas, who is also bound to a chair. Instead of killing him, they untie him, hand him a bat, and threaten him with beating his own mother. When Lucas expresses his dissatisfaction, they shoot him. Following that, the two women staged his body to appear as if he had committed suicide. It is revealed that they intend to blame him for all of the murders. Desperate, the mother offers them money in exchange for her life to be spared. Instead of sparing her, Katie uses the lawnmower to brutally murder her. In the following scene, Uncle Jason arrives at Katie's house to pick her and Sloane up. Some time has passed, it appears. Katie and Sloane are picked up at the airport and excitedly fly to New York City.